Hey guys, my name is Ryan.
And my name is Miska.
And welcome to Overwatch Central. And welcome to What's the Meta, a series where we look at the rise and fall of heroes' popularity within the scene and talk about why that might be the case. So this What's the Meta episode is going to be very detailed, going into a lot of stats provided by Omnic Meta. You can check them out in the description below. We wanted to look at the Mercy and Junkrat changes and how they affect the game, so this is more of a focus point that we can correlate to future What's the Meta episodes with. So we're going to break down in detail where a lot of the heroes currently are, just so everybody knows the current landscape of the game. But there's a lot of information, let's get straight into it.
First up, we're going to go over the tanks, and we usually do this by alphabetical order. We'll start with D.Va, as her popularity is actually on the up. Average increases of 5.64% with a rise of 11% alone in Masters. She's the most popular tank out of all of them, but still has people coming in to learn and play her, so her usage is still kind of going up. Maybe some are inspired to play her because of Poco bombs or seeing the Overwatch League players use her in an effective team comp, but she's just doing very well right now. Easily one of the strongest and most flexible heroes at the moment. ORISA is next and is our biggest riser in the tank category, with a 7.56% average rise in pick rate across all tiers, and the higher you climb, the bigger the ORISA rise is as well, peaking at 13.42% in GM. One of the more staple meta characters currently for sure, excellent with anti-dive compositions and so on, and she also has the highest win rate currently of 53.16%, if you ignore heroes like Torb and Symmetra who have a very skewed win rate. And ORISA's win rate is as high as 57.94% in GM actually. The Hog ORISA combo is also very strong, and this is definitely a reason as to why she's gone up in usage as well, but ORISA does have good utility on her own and can be effective in a number of lineups, so now's a pretty good time to pick her up, as it's not looking like she'll be nerfed anytime soon either. Because of the ORISA rise though, we've seen heroes like Reinhardt fall. It's a similar trend to ORISA, however in this case the higher you climb, the more Reinhardt falls in pick rate obviously. On average it's 3.38% minus in pick rate, but in GM he's fallen as much as 12.77% in pick rate. So he's pretty much only played on certain maps, but really not a popular hero. Reinhardt just has a terrible time against the likes of Junkrat, ORISA and Hog and all that spam, so it's understandable that the players are switching Rein out for something else. It's hard to say whether the Junkrat nerfs will make Reinhardt's life easier or not, but things aren't looking good for our Crusader. 6 months ago, Rodok was at the bottom of the barrel after his damage nerfs. Nowadays, he's finding a very stable pick rate and slowly climbing as well. Rodok's average pick rate has risen by 2.73%, which isn't loads, but hey, it's a little bit of a rise actually. And like ORISA, his pick rate rises more in the higher tiers. Rodok is very good for ladder as well due to his kit and how he can self-sustain himself, fulfill a number of different roles including spam, he can even peel for his team if you play him right, get solo picks, and also of course take care of himself using his heal, which doesn't just heal but also reduces damage. It's just such a good character in my opinion. I'm quite surprised it's not been picked even more honestly, especially because of ORISA, but just because it's such a good hero. Winston, quite surprisingly, has actually fallen a few percent. It's not much, but still surprising considering how prevalent and meta dive comp is right now. Winston fell 1.93%, and the highest being in Diamond, falling down minus 4.73%. Winston's just that sort of hero that will have a bit of a weird time in competitive play in my opinion, with a bit of a spammy sort of meta right now. If you don't play Winston right, you will just die pretty quickly, and because of this I imagine there are a lot of players that have been frustrated with the hero and chosen D.Va instead in certain cases, so that might be why he's fallen a little bit. Personally, I feel like it can be very hard to play Winston occasionally, in ladder that is, because of communication mainly. He's that sort of hero that if you dive and your team actually follows up on you, you can do a lot of damage. And even on your own, if you just manage your cooldowns well, you use your shield correctly, you dodge in and out of your bubble, and you use your ultimate when needed, you can actually get quite a lot done, even in games that seem somewhat hopeless. But it's definitely gotten a bit harder to play due to meta and so on, I'd say. Next up, Zarya, who is the tank that's fallen the most out of all of them, minus 6.52% on average across all the tiers, with the biggest drop being in the highest tier of GM, falling a massive 14.51%. And as you climb, Zarya is picked less and less. D.Va Hog are much more obvious options and can suit more maps and compositions as off-tanks. Zarya still has use here and there and can still be effective, but dive and anti-dive compositions don't really favor Zarya as much as the other off-tanks we just mentioned.
Now we'll go over the supports, and we'll start with Ana, and Ana's fallen a massive 8.52% overall. Her biggest drop was actually in Masters, which was almost 16%. She's enjoyed the recent buff to her damage, she's been able to look after herself a little bit more, but honestly it doesn't seem enough to contest the likes of Zen, Moira and of course Mercy when it comes to that healing position. I think she still needs more, I think she needs more buffs in her favour, and she still gets her backside kicked by Dive and those heroes that used to punish her before, and this is no different now. So again, Anna needs a little bit more help if she wants to contest that top spot. Lucio's another hero that's fallen a huge margin, 7.8% on average. It's a pretty big drop, but the biggest drop again was in GM, which was almost 13%. You'll start to see where these players are going to migrate to, but Lucio just isn't as prevalent and as strong as he was before, at least people don't perceive him that way. It's hard to say whether the Mercy nerfs will return him to his former glory, but one would hope that at least his pick rate does increase somewhat when these changes come through. Now we go on to Mercy. Mercy's pick rate has risen, there's no surprise there. On average it's risen 13.18%, but the amazing thing to look at here is her pick rate is actually increased in GM alone by 33.85%. meaning that it's a whole third that she's gone up by. And considering she had a pretty strong pick rate of about 60% before, this is pretty big. A lot of this is to do with the dramatic fall off that we saw in the last meta report, which was after the recent Mercy nerfs, that people thought that she was going to be too weak there to play. So we saw a big drop off and then people realised that the new Mercy was still going to be really good and you couldn't really do without her, so her pick rate just went back to where it was. There's definite correlation between Lucio and Anna dropping the pick rate and Mercy rising again. There is another hero that's taken a bit of the pick rate away from these two heroes as well, but hopefully the Mercy nerfs alleviates the bit of imbalance here going on in the support category and we get to see more support variety in general, including Mercy of course. But definitely now it feels like if you don't run Mercy you're going to have such a hard time winning the game, especially if the enemy team have a Mercy of their own. But I would be lying to say that all of the support players dived onto Mercy. Moira has also risen a little bit as well. Quite the same heights as Mercy, she's risen on average 4.14%, but it's mostly in the lower tiers. But in the highest tiers, she's dropped near 10% in GM, which again has to do with the two major supports stacking up all of the playtime. I do like Moira, I think she's in a really good strong position, and hopefully again the Mercy nerfs open up her playtime a little bit more in the higher tiers, but also there is a strong chance that triple tank could become meta again, and if it does, Moira is going to be the dead center of that terrible storm, so just something to bear in mind when these changes do go live with Junkrat and Mercy. Symmetra has fallen 1.81% with no major drop-offs anywhere, she's pretty stagnant, really isn't much to talk about either with Symmetra anymore that hasn't been mentioned already. Has niche use, is fun to play but horrible to play against and often with if the Symmetra on your team is being really stubborn and refusing to change when necessary, but certainly needs some love from Blizzard, that's for sure. It's hard to say what she needs though, not sure about another rework but she does need something. And finally Zenyatta is the other support with a big pick rate boost, 5.71% on average, which isn't anything too surprising, but when you look at specific areas, more notably Grandmaster, he's had a rise of 23.53%. In short, Zen Mercy is the only go-to strategy in the highest tiers of Overwatch, and it basically mirrors the must-pick lineups that we see in the Overwatch League. We've seen Moira a little bit, and Lucio too, some of the quad tank compositions, but the majority of game modes still have this Zen Mercy lineup in total, so it's not surprising that this has found its way into competitive ladder as well.
Next up, the offense heroes, and we've had a bit of a rise and fall here and there in this category too, but much less in comparison to the tanks and also supports, but there's still some pretty bizarre results. Doomfist has actually risen in popularity, and to be fair, he's one of the least picked characters in the game currently, but he has gone up 1.85% on average across all tiers. What's more interesting though is that he also gets more popular as you climb, hitting a rise of 5.46% in GM. Maybe it's those inspired by Chips' Doomfist that keep picking him, but could also have to do with the recent movement changes and bug fixes that have made Doomfist a little bit more viable, and some people seem to be giving him a second chance. Interesting to note either way. Genji though has fallen quite a bit. Overall he's fallen 3.59%, with the biggest hit coming in Masters, losing 6.4% of his usage there. Not a huge difference, but definitely worth noting. It's hard to say if it's heroes like Junkrat that keep Genji back a little bit, as they're able to burst him down if he does make any type of mistake. Genji's still one of the most popular DPS heroes, but isn't as commanding in the game as much as the likes of Tracer. McCree has surprisingly also fallen a little bit, went with -3% on average, with a huge drop in GM of -7.77%. Another correlation of the higher you climb, the bigger the loss and that sort of stuff. And it's hard to say why. McCree has seen a lot of popularity in the Overwatch League, especially in anti-dive comps. Maybe McCree is losing out to the likes of Junkrat or Tracer in popularity. He's being overwhelmed on dive too hard. Players in Overwatch League can utilize McCree very well, but in ladder it can definitely be harder, I guess. It's interesting to see this hero's pick rate going in the opposite direction of his pick rate in the Overwatch League though, especially in the highest tiers. Pharah has fallen, but is in a pretty stagnant spot right now. She's still this sort of niche pick and niche DPS, but good on certain maps and in certain situations. She's fallen 1.52% on average, so really not a lot at all, but doesn't fall any further than 4% in any tier. She's found in niche usage in the Overwatch League as well, especially on the control maps, Numbani and Iconwall 2 on the first point at least, but she hasn't really gone anywhere in the past few months, to be honest. Reaper though is in a very comfortable spot, and even though he's fallen decimals in popularity overall of 0.21%, he's almost doing better right now in my opinion. He can find use against troublesome tanks, and with the talk of triple tank and quad tank coming back after Mercy nerfs potentially, it will be interesting to see if Reaper rises to the occasion as something more meta. We're gonna have to wait and see for that one though. Soldier has fallen -1.62%, so not a lot, nothing too dramatic there. However, much like McCree, his biggest drop is in GM, falling 6.41%. In fact, all offensive heroes other than Doomfist and Tracer have fallen, but does that mean that more players are playing the defense heroes then? Well, we'll find out in a bit. Sombra has fallen 0.5%, and not much has really happened with this hero at all. Her win rate's actually completely unchanged, 0.00% change overall in the GM tier. Just pretty interesting to see, but yeah, she's not moved anywhere. Still a niche pick, good on certain maps, Temple of Anubis defense for example, at least on the second point for the defending team, but yeah, very niche hero. And Tracer, whose pick rate actually hasn't really increased despite what we kind of talked about earlier. The pick rate change is really not a lot here. She's in the green, but only has an increase of 0.45%, so nothing exciting there at all. She's very meta and very strong though in the high tiers, but no growth this time around, as she's struggling to be picked up more in the lower and sort of mid tiers of the competitive ladder.
To answer Miska's question before, the playbase aren't dropping the offense category for the defense class. It looks like more players are flocking over to the supports and tanks, which is obviously really healthy for the game, as both of these classes have kind of suffered a little bit over the recent seasons. But saying that, we'll look over the defense category very quickly. Bastion's dropped 0.2% in total, nothing really much to go over. Bastion finds healthy use on maps like Junkertown, so it's in a pretty decent spot. Has maps that he's really good on, has maps that he isn't, so it's just a case by case basis. Hanzo's fallen less than 1% on 0.87%, again very niche, very frustrating to play with and against, but hopefully the idea of a rework may change one of the more annoying heroes in the game, but it's too early to say what that change could and may be. Junkrat has risen in popularity, but only by 2.9%, quite surprising with how strong and prevalent Junkrat seems to be right now, but there's no big boosts in player base other than the 4.17% rise in bronze, which kind of makes sense really. Mei has dropped 0.27%, so again, not really much. I feel that she's a hero that has a lot of hidden impact, but just hasn't quite found her stride. I certainly want to bring this up on the channel at a later date, but we'll have to wait and see on that one as well. Toby has fallen 0.99%, same old for our engineer. Widowmaker's actually fallen 0.6%. This is strange considering how prominent she's been in the Overwatch League and in the pro scene overall. She's great at getting those picks and forcing out reses from the enemy Mercy, but I guess it's hard to pull off at the same effect in the lower ranks. But there's no doubt that a solid Widowmaker on your team can win you the game. Maybe we're just lacking those solid Widowmakers. That would be probably the best bet really. But there is no big changes in the defense category at all. Everything's fairly stagnant and stable, but that is going to change with the next balance patch with Junkrat being dropped a little bit. But that's everything we wanted to go over in today's video. Thank you very much for watching. Thanks again to Omnic Meta that supplied all of this data. You can find all those details in the description below. Let us know what you think though of the current meta, and give us your predictions of how the game is going to look when Mercy and Junkrat do get nerfed. Let us know below, and until next time, take care and we'll see you then.